Did you know that a fearful dog and an anxious dog are subtly different? Yes, there are definitely some overlap between the two, but today I want to talk about how you can establish whether or not your dog is experiencing fear or a more severe case, which would be anxiety. So if you're interested in learning that behavior, then keep watching. What's up, guys? It's Jenna with Dog Liaison, where I coach you on how to enhance your dog's mental health needs. On this channel, we break down scientific research in order to inform and educate on how to train dogs. So if you're interested in a nerdier approach to canine cognition, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you get notified when I drop a new video. So let's start by defining the difference between anxiety and fear. And I want to be very clear that I didn't just pull these definitions out of thin air. These actually come from human psychologists. With that said, though, even within the human psychology world, there seems to be a little bit discrepancy on which is which, but there is a general consensus, which is what I'm going to share with you today. So the best way to distinguish between fear or anxiety has to do with when a perceived threat is in the environment. So if a perceived threat, and perceived is a very important word there because it doesn't have to be an actual threat, it just has to do with whether or not the dog thinks it's a threat. If there is a perceived threat currently in the environment at that exact moment, well, then it's fear. If, however, the perceived threat is not in the environment and the dog is just preparing for the possibility that the threat could show up, then it's anxiety. So just to be clear, fear is when the threat is imminent. The threat is right there, the dog must respond and has no choice. Whereas anxiety is the preparation for the event. It is that worry, that preemptive worry that prepares the dog that the threat might be around the corner. On top of that, anxiety is a little bit more diagnosable. Like anxiety can be diagnosed as general anxiety disorder by a veterinary behaviorist, whereas fear is a little bit more assumed. Every species is equipped with fear, and this keeps them from dying. This is a systematic way for the body to say, hey, don't do that, that's gonna kill you. Even with that said, it is very difficult for a person, a human, to say whether or not a dog is experiencing specifically fear or experiencing specifically anxiety. And the reason is because the truth is only the dog can tell you. And since we're not going to be having telepathy with any canines anytime soon, all we have is the most educated guesses on whether or not a dog is experiencing anxiety or fear. There really isn't a definitive way to say either way. So some common behaviors that you might look for that indicate that your dog is experiencing either fear or anxiety would be things like a lip lick, hunched body posture, a yawn, hyper scanning, tension in the musculature, piloerection, which is actually the fur standing up on the back, whale eye. So the dog might be looking over here and that might be displaying it a little extra white. That's whale eye. You might be noticing things like a play bow stretch, right? And usually what happens is they do a big yawn. So they go, right? And panting, or the inverse of panting, which could be a tight jaw. So if, for example, they're outside and you know that it's warm enough, they probably should be regulating their breathing, they probably should be panting, and yet they're closing their mouth and they're holding on to it, that's a really clear indication that the dog is experiencing a level of stress that we need to relieve. These are more subtle stress signals that often get overlooked, and when you see them, what you want to ask yourself is there an obvious threat or perceived threat in the environment? So, for example, if you think your dog is fearful of people, you can ask yourself, did a new person just walk into the space right then, and that is causing my dog to do that big stress yawn, right? That would probably be more of a fear response. On the other hand, if basically there's no new variable whatsoever except for the fact that you're outside your door and you see that yawn, then you might think to yourself, okay, my dog is preparing for the reality that a human might be walking into this space around the corner. So you want to think about, what is my dog's threat or perceived threat? What does he find scary? And is that threat actually in the space? Now, some specific behaviors that you might look for are, obvious ones like fight, flight, or freeze. So fight could be that the dog is lunging, barking, growling, biting, any of the more aggressive behaviors that you can see this video for more information on. These ones are going to be much more overt stress signals. You might also see flight. And this could be that the dog is trying to get into a certain corner. This is usually inhibited by leashes. So when I see a dog is trying to run in another direction, but the person is just standing still because they're like, I don't want my dog to pull. Usually that's the dog trying to flee the environment. You might also see this, for example, if you have a dog with pretty serious anxiety, you might notice that when you go out into the world, they have one little incident and then they want to flee right back home and they actually drag you back to their house. So that would be a flight response. Finally, we have our freeze response, which most people usually perceive as a stay or the dog is being good, but what is actually happening is that the dog is effectively shutting down. They're becoming very still. They might just be looking in one little zone. They might not actually be responding to any information in the environment. And this shutdown is very hard on the dog's ego. And so we want to be avoiding the fight, flight, or freeze mode as much as possible. But if we have to choose any of the three, our flight response is always most optimal. Now, on top of all this, you want to also address the fact that a dog could be literally just overwhelmed by the outdoors. You walk them into the front yard and it is just sensory overload. Everything is overwhelming. That would probably be following a more anxious diagnosis, probably. It's, for the record, unethical for me to diagnose, so I'm not going to. But if you have a dog who is chronically shaking, or a dog who is chronically scanning his environment, and he just never really gets into the proper mode to learn or to think logically, that is definitely an indication that your dog is dealing with chronic anxiety, and I very much recommend you take your dog to a vet behaviorist right away. All that said, if you're looking for a deep dive, I did a 4-part series on dog body language that I recommend you start watching at this link right here. It'll also be linked in the description box below for you to check out. If your dog is experiencing these fear or anxiety behaviors when you take him out for a walk, so perhaps your dog is highly reactive or perhaps aggressive when you take him out into the world for his afternoon walk, for example, then you're probably the perfect candidate for my free online masterclass. In this masterclass, I will be giving you the step-by-step framework to help your dog recover from aggressiveness and reactivity, to relieve that anxiety, desensitize triggers. It is the exact framework that I teach in my signature Recovering Rover program, and I'm giving it away for free. So if you're interested in joining this live event, it'll be November 19th at 4:30 p.m. Pacific. If you're not able to join live, you will still get a recording. So still sign up using the link in the description box below to join this event, get your copy of the recording, and I hope to see you there. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, smash that like button by letting the YouTube algorithm know that you enjoyed it. And if you enjoy this content on relieving anxiety, relieving fear, enhancing mental health in canines, then do me a favor, consider subscribing, hit the notification bell so you get notified when I drop a new video, and I'll see you guys very soon.